It was barely 8:45 a.m., but this Monday was already spiraling into disaster. My wife, Marissa, a top real estate agent, had left for work with a smirk I couldn't quite place. Shaking off my irritation, I focused on my workload, but within an hour my body betrayed me. A sharp, unbearable pain had me gasping in the office restroom. My boss, Alan, rushed to my aid, his concern genuine. "You need to see a doctor," he urged. Grateful, I left for urgent care, unaware that my life was about to unravel. 30 minutes after arriving at the clinic, a nurse called my name with an expression that made my stomach drop. "Mr. Watson, you have gonorrhea," the doctor stated bluntly. My mind reeled. "That's impossible," I stammered. I'd only ever been with Marissa. The doctor's expression softened. "She may not show symptoms, but she needs to be tested immediately." The weight of his words crushed me. As I drove home, reality settled in. Marissa had been unfaithful. I called my parents, needing their guidance. My father, a man of unwavering faith, asked the painful question. "Were you unfaithful?" My voice was steady. "Never." He sighed. "Then you know what must be done." Determined, I searched through our financial records. Years ago, Marissa had insisted on filing taxes separately. At the time, I hadn't questioned it, but now I found bank statements from an account I didn't recognize, one with nearly $1 million saved over the last 8 years. My heart pounded. A text from Marissa lit up my phone. "Running late. Don't wait for dinner." I stared at the screen, gripping my phone. "Yeah, sure." This time I didn't say I love you. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't sure I ever would again. I arrived at Gina Hawkins' office, parked my car, and made my way to her suite. A blonde receptionist greeted me with a warm smile. "I have a 12:30 appointment with Gina Hawkins," I informed her. She quickly checked her computer and then led me to Gina's office. Gina stood up to greet me, shaking my hand. "Good to see you, Greg," she said with a smile. "Would you like some coffee?" "That would be great, thanks," I replied. Turning to the receptionist, Gina requested, "2 coffees, please, and maybe some butter and nuts." "Sure," the receptionist responded, before stepping out. Moments later, she returned with our drinks and some butter portions. Gina gestured for me to sit, and I took a seat across from her. "I was surprised to get a call from your father this morning," Gina began. "So, you're dealing with a legal issue?" "Yeah, looks like Marissa's been unfaithful," I admitted. "I'm sorry to hear that," Gina responded sympathetically. "I always thought you two were solid." "So did I. But I guess I was wrong." I sighed. "Can you tell me what my options are?" I laid out the situation, detailing my visit to the clinic and the financial discrepancies I had uncovered. Gina listened, carefully, nodding thoughtfully. "Divorce isn't always about justice," she explained. "It often comes down to finances. This state has no-fault divorce laws, but if you have solid evidence of adultery, you can still file on those grounds." "What, about the STD she gave me?" I asked. Gina acknowledged the concern. "That's a strong point, but her lawyer might argue you contracted it elsewhere. We know that's not true, but proving it in court is another matter. As for the hidden money, she could claim it was for something innocent, like a future surprise. For you." "You don't believe that, do you?" I asked. "No." "It looks more like an exit strategy," Gina replied. "She's probably waiting for the right moment. Maybe after your daughter finishes school, to leave without complications. Proving intent, however, will be difficult." "So am I just out of luck?" I pressed. "Not necessarily," Gina reassured me. "A private investigator could gather the evidence we need. It's not cheap, but it could be worth it. Do you want to go forward with that?" "Yes, let's do it," I decided. "Great." Gina grabbed a notepad. "I need details. Her car, license plate, places she frequents." I pulled out my phone. "Actually, when she lost her phone a few months ago, I installed a tracker. Let me check if it's still active." I opened the app and found her location, an unfamiliar address on the north side of town. I showed Gina. "Perfect." She jotted it down and immediately called the investigator, giving him all the necessary details. After hanging up, she looked at me firmly. We'll handle this as discreetly as possible. Now let's talk about custody. You have 2 daughters, Lisa and Ginger, 14 and 13, right? Yes, I want custody, I confirmed. Courts often favor the mother, but given the circumstances, we have a case. Who's been the primary caregiver? Marissa is out most evenings, so I'm usually the one at home. Got it. One more thing, are you absolutely certain the girls are biologically yours? I hesitated. I believe so, but does it matter? I'm on their birth certificates, and I've raised them since birth. I understand, Gina said gently. But it might be wise to confirm. I can refer you to a lab for a paternity test. I'll think about it. I exhaled. What about the house? No mortgage, I explained. It was my grandparents' home, now in a family trust under my parents' names. They let us live there. That simplifies things, Gina noted. No mortgage issues, but personal property and other assets will still be divided. I'll prepare a list of what you need to consider. For now, complete the checklist I give you. I nodded. Should I confront her? At the very least, inform her to get tested to prevent further spread of the STD, Gina advised. Makes sense, I agreed. After finalizing some paperwork, Gina handed me a checklist and a card for the lab. Handle these tasks, and we'll update you when we learn more from the investigator. I left her office, paid for her services, and drove straight to the lab. After picking up the test kit, I stopped by the bank to verify financial details. Then, I headed home, determined to take control of the situation. As I made myself a coffee, my daughters walked in. Daddy, you're home early, Ginger noted, surprised. It's been a hectic day. Listen, pack a few things. You'll be staying with your grandparents for a few days. Why? Ginger's voice wavered. Is something wrong with Mom? Did you have a fight? Something's wrong, but we haven't fought. Yet. I tried to keep it light. Lisa's eyes narrowed. You caught her cheating, didn't you? I froze. What makes you say that? She hesitated. I heard her on the phone a couple of times using that fake voice she does when she's flirting. She said, I can't wait to see you again, love. Then giggled. It sounded personal. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner. It's okay. I hugged her. I appreciate you telling me. Lisa added, she's been acting distant, like she doesn't want to talk to us. Do you feel that too, Ginger? I asked. She nodded. Yeah, like we're bothering her. I gave them both a reassuring hug. You can always talk to me. But first, I need to swab your cheeks for a test. A DNA test? Lisa asked, worried. I know you're my daughters, I reassured her. This is just to confirm things legally. Are you getting a divorce? Lisa asked directly. It looks that way, I admitted. Isn't there any way to forgive her? Ginger asked softly. I don't think so, I said. She made a choice that I can't ignore. Lisa gasped. She gave you an STD, didn't she? I sighed. Yes. Anger flashed in her eyes. I hate her. I wanted to tell her not to hate, but I couldn't. I understood too well. Instead, I said, I love you both and I will always be here for you. We love you too, Daddy, Lisa said, tears streaming down her face. My resolve hardened. I vowed to fight for them. Justice would be served one way or another. They believe the kids are his and that's all that matters, she claimed. How long have you been messing around? He asked. She smirked. Since the beginning. He has no clue. So he's in the dark just because he's never been with anyone else? Exactly, she confirmed. Hearing her dismiss our family so casually shattered me. Her betrayal ran far deeper than I had ever imagined. Are you staying with him? For now, at least until the girls finish high school. And after that, I'll be free. Parties, new adventures, maybe even moving abroad. Who knows? Can you sneak away for the weekend? Of course. I'll make up some excuse. He believes anything I say. She grinned, unaware that everything was about to change. I watched the video in silence, my hands trembling. The depth of her deception was overwhelming. I called Gina. "So, what's your next move?" she asked. "Burn it all down," I said, my voice cold. "Consider it done," she affirmed. I printed the evidence, photos of her with other men, and placed them neatly in a folder. Tonight, she'd see the truth laid bare. But she never came home. Hours passed. My calls went straight to voicemail. Just as panic set in, my phone rang. "Mr. Watson, this is Angela Barnes from Mercy Hospital. Your wife has been in an accident. Can you come immediately?" My heart sank. At the hospital, a police officer met me. "A drunk driver ran a red light and hit her car," he explained. "She's lucky to be alive." Then the doctor arrived. "She has multiple fractures and internal injuries, but there's something else." He hesitated. "Preliminary tests suggest she may be HIV positive." Shock washed over me like ice water. "I just found out this morning she has gonorrhea," I muttered. "You should get tested immediately," the doctor advised. I barely heard him. My mind reeled. When I finally saw her, she was bandaged, bruised, barely recognizable. I took off my wedding ring, placed it inside the envelope with the photos, and left it on the table beside her bed. "Make sure she gets this when she wakes up," I told the nurse. As I turned to leave, I noticed she was still wearing her wedding rings. I slipped them off her fingers. "Goodbye, Marissa," I whispered. And then, without looking back, I walked away. I woke up feeling the weight of everything that had happened. The events of the past few days replayed in my mind like a relentless storm. Taking a deep breath, I called my doctor's office and was surprised to find they could fit me in for an appointment later that morning. After securing my appointment, I called my parents to update them on Marissa's situation. They were understandably shocked, particularly about the possibility of her being HIV positive. My father, always the pragmatic one, asked me to send the details to his email, which I did immediately. "It's really bad," I admitted over the phone. "It's all right, son," he reassured me. "We'll handle this together." Once I had sent the email, I called Gina to inform her of the latest developments. She was taken aback but mentioned that this would allow her to finalize the divorce papers more promptly. I then contacted Marissa's office to inform her colleagues of her accident. They expressed their condolences and promised to visit her. The following 2 weeks were a blur of activity. I found a suitable 2-bedroom ground-floor apartment with an attached garage and secured it by paying the deposit and 2 months' rent up front, using funds from Marissa's half of our joint account. When the girls and Loretta arrived, we packed up all of Marissa's belongings, including our wedding album, and moved them to her new place. During this hectic time, I also received the results from the DNA lab confirming that both girls were indeed mine. It was a small yet significant relief amidst the chaos. I met with the insurance adjuster to inspect the wreck of Marissa's car. Both of us were astounded that she had survived the crash, given the state of the vehicle. Since the car and insurance policy were in her name, the insurance company would issue her a check directly. I gathered the last of her belongings from the car and brought them to her new apartment, trying to close this painful chapter and focus on rebuilding our lives. Week after the accident, my mom called. "Did you stop by to see Marissa?" "No, I haven't," I replied. "Why?" "I was just wondering," she said, concern lacing her voice. "She's made it clear she doesn't care about us and wants to escape everything," I explained. "I'm giving her what she wants, just not how she planned it." 2 weeks later, I visited my doctor. Thankfully, I was clear of the gonorrhea Marissa had passed on, but we were still waiting to see if there was anything more serious. Physically, I was nearly healed, but emotionally, I was far from recovery. Later that day, I called my boss, Alan, to tell him I'd be returning to work. He was pleased. That afternoon, the hospital called to inform me that Marissa had woken from her coma. The nurse suggested I visit that evening, which worked well for me. I updated Gina, who had already filed the divorce papers and was waiting for Marissa to regain consciousness so the documents could be served. She arranged for the process server to meet me at the hospital. Next, I called Loretta to see if she would join me. Then I spoke to my daughters. "Your mom's awake," I told them. Their response was lukewarm. I'm going to see her this afternoon. Would you like to come? No thanks, Dad, Lisa replied firmly. I'm too mad at her right now. Me too, added Ginger. And I've got a lot of homework. All right, I said. I'll drop you off at your grandparents' then. By 4:30 I was driving them to my parents' house. Let us know how it goes, son, Dad said as I left the girls with them. I will, I assured him. Good. Then you can have some of Mom's lasagna when you get back, he said with a comforting smile. Mom's lasagna had a way of making any day better. Sounds perfect, I said, feeling a slight lift in my spirits as I headed to the hospital. At the hospital, the process server handed Marissa the envelope and snapped a picture. You are being served with divorce papers, he stated formally. Marissa took the papers, her hands trembling slightly. There was a long pause as she scanned the top page, her face draining of color. I see, she finally murmured, setting the documents beside her on the hospital bed. I turned to Loretta, who had remained silent, her expression somber. Loretta, thanks for being here, I said. Of course, she replied softly, her eyes not leaving Marissa. Turning back to Marissa, I felt a mix of relief and sorrow. We needed to resolve this for everyone's sake. Marissa nodded, her eyes downcast. I understand, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I never wanted it to come to this. I know, I said, though I wasn't sure if that was entirely true. But here we are. The room was heavy with unspoken words and tension. I decided it was time to leave. I'll let you rest, I said. Marissa didn't look up. Thank you, Greg, and I am sorry, she added, her voice cracking slightly. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak further. Loretta and I exited the room, leaving Marissa with her thoughts and the reality of the papers she now held. Loretta squeezed my arm. Are you okay? She asked. I will be, I answered, managing a small smile. Thanks for coming, it meant a lot. She hugged me briefly. Call me if you need anything, she said. I will, I promised. As I drove away from the hospital, the weight of the past weeks seemed to lift slightly. The future was uncertain, but at least now there was a path forward. The next morning I woke up feeling the heavy weight of everything that had happened. I called my doctor's office and was surprised to get an appointment later that morning. After securing it, I reached out to my parents to update them on Marissa's condition. They were understandably shocked, especially about the possibility of her being HIV positive. They offered to bring the girls to visit her if they wished. I also shared with them the troubling evidence I had uncovered about Marissa. My dad asked me to send the details to his email, which I did immediately. It's really bad, I admitted over the phone. It's all right, son, he reassured me. We'll handle this together. After that, I called Gina to inform her of the latest developments. She was taken aback but mentioned that this could help finalize the divorce papers more quickly. Then I contacted Marissa's office to inform her colleagues about her accident. They expressed their condolences and promised to visit her. The next 2 weeks were a blur of activity. I found a suitable 2-bedroom ground-floor apartment with an attached garage and secured it by paying the deposit and 2 months' rent up front, using funds from Marissa's half of our joint account. When the girls and Loretta arrived, we packed up all of Marissa's belongings, including our wedding album, and moved them to her new place. During this chaotic time, I received the results from the DNA lab, confirming that both girls were indeed mine. It was a small yet significant relief amidst the turmoil. I met with the insurance adjuster to inspect Marissa's wrecked car. We were both astounded that she had survived, given the extent of the damage. Since both the car and insurance policy were in her name, the insurance company would issue her a check directly. I gathered the last of her belongings from the vehicle and brought them to her new apartment, trying to close this painful chapter and focus on rebuilding our lives. A week after the accident, during a phone call, my mom asked, "Did you stop by to see Marissa?" "No, I haven't," I replied. "Why?" "Just wondering," she said, concern lacing her voice. "She's made it clear she doesn't care about us and wants to escape everything," I explained. "I'm giving her what she wants." just not in the way she planned. 2 weeks later, I visited my doctor. Thankfully, I was clear of the infection Marissa had passed on, though we were still waiting on tests for anything more serious. Physically, I was nearly healed, but emotionally, I was far from recovered. That afternoon, the hospital called to inform me that Marissa had woken from her coma. The nurse suggested I visit that evening, which worked well for me. I updated Gina, who had already filed the divorce papers, and was waiting for Marissa to regain consciousness so they could be served. She arranged for her BFF to meet me at the hospital. Then I called Loretta to see if she would join me. Lastly, I spoke with my daughters. "Your mom is awake," I told them. Their reaction was lukewarm. "I'm too mad at her right now," Lisa said, firmly. "Me too," Ginger added, "and I have a lot of homework." "All right," I said. "I'll drop you off at your grandparents' place." By 4:30, I was driving them there. "Let us know how it goes, son," my dad said. "I will," I assured him. "I'll come back for the girls afterward." "Good. Then you can have some of Mom's lasagna when you get back," he offered with a comforting smile. "Sounds perfect," I said, feeling a small lift in my spirits as I headed to the hospital. At the hospital, Gina's BFF handed Marissa the divorce papers. Her hands trembled slightly as she took them, scanning the top page as the color drained from her face. "I see," she murmured, setting the papers aside. "We need to resolve this," I told her. "For everyone's sake." Marissa nodded, eyes downcast. "I understand," she whispered. "I never wanted it to come to this." "I know," I said, though I wasn't sure if I believed it. "But here we are." The room was heavy with unspoken words. Deciding it was time to leave, I said, "I'll let you rest." "Thank you, Greg." "And I am sorry," she added, her voice cracking. "Slightly." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak further. Loretta and I exited the room, leaving Marissa with her thoughts and the reality of the papers she now held. "Are you okay?" Loretta asked, squeezing my arm. "I will be," I said, managing a small smile. "Thanks for coming, it meant a lot." She hugged me briefly. "Call me if you need anything." "I will," I promised. Driving away from the hospital, the weight of the past weeks seemed to lift slightly. The future was uncertain, but at least now there was a path forward. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. I was legally free from Marissa, and thankfully both of us tested negative for HIV. To my surprise, Gina handed me a check for over $450,000, half of the secret account Marissa had hidden. With no immediate need for it, I set it aside for Lisa and Ginger's college funds. Life settled into a new rhythm. The girls kept me busy, and though single fatherhood had its challenges, my mother's support was invaluable. Over time, the Yao girls reconnected with Marissa, spending occasional afternoons with her. She had resumed her real estate career, this time with a new company, after being dismissed from her previous job due to disclosed indiscretions. Meanwhile, I noticed growing attention from single women at church. They often sent me home with homemade dishes, pies, casseroles, and of course lasagna. One evening, Lisa remarked, "Dad, you need to start dating again. It's not good for you to be alone." "I wouldn't even know where to start," I admitted. "It's simple, Dad. Just ask someone to dinner," Ginger chimed in. "You can do that, right?" She had a point. That Wednesday, I ran into Rhonda Carson at the church coffee shop. A widow raising a teenage daughter alone, she had recently given me a casserole I particularly enjoyed. "Hi, Rhonda. How are you?" I greeted her. "Hanging in there, Greg. How about you?" "Doing okay. That casserole you made was amazing, by the way." "Thank you," she smiled. "Glad to hear it. Single parenting isn't easy, is it?" "No, but we manage," I agreed. Encouraged by our easy conversation, I took a chance. "Rhonda, I'm new to this, but would you like to have dinner with me? Maybe this Friday?" She smiled warmly. "I'd like that." "Great. How about the new Texas Roadhouse?" "Sounds perfect." As I left the coffee shop, I felt a lightness I hadn't in a long time. Maybe it was finally time for a fresh start, not just for me, but for all of us.